Hey everybody, we are on again. This is time number 4 that we've been on live today, starting with our morning glory prayer intercession. Then we did our 12 o'clock hour of power with the writers and producers of the movie Justice on Trial. Then we did a 2 o'clock with Darnell Butler talking about pastor and worship leader relationships. And now we're on here again with this great consortium of minds talking about when do we say justice. I'm so glad that you all have joined tonight. Go ahead and make your watch parties, like and share. Let everybody know that some rich content is getting ready to happen tonight. You don't want to miss this kind of conversation. A lot is happening, and following the outbreak of COVID-19, a global pandemic, we now are in the midst of social justice issues all across our nation, all across our country. The cries of young and old alike, looking for justice, trying to find out how it is that we move forward as a society and community. And this conversation comes to us in one of the most prolific times ever. We've never seen a pandemic before. We've never seen this kind of racial stir before. And here we are, mixed and mingled with it all together. And we've assembled a cadre of individuals tonight who are professionals at having this kind of conversation. Let me introduce you to them. Here we have Elder Attorney Norman Harris. They're from Champions from Justice here in Tampa, Florida. He's my brother. We do community handshakes together, not physical handshakes, but we have the young people talking with law enforcement to cause them to have a better relationship with each other. We got Attorney Dowdell there in Georgia. He's a famed attorney as well. I understand that he is well versed in the conversation about reparations and how it is that we can have healing in our community and world. And then we have Dr. Dean President Antipas Harris, the President and Dean of the Jakes Divinity School there in Texas. I'm so glad to have you all on this live tonight. We're going to share some positivity and let the folks know what it is that we can expect even in this time and season, and then moving forward after pandemic, after the marches, after the protest. What do we do to pull this all back together again? I want to start by showing a video right quick. I want to start by showing a video. This will be the trailer of the movie that we're talking about. This will be the trailer of the movie Justice on Trial. It is a Chad Lawson Cooper movie that is releasing on July the 4th. And take a moment to look at this movie trailer if you don't mind.
Slavery gave America a fear of black people and a taste for violent punishment.
I was beaten, shot.
African Americans are suing the United States government for reparations.
You are clearly one eyelash away being held in contempt. Do you understand me?
Alicia Robinson Cooper as Harriet Tubman, Chad Cooper II as Emmett Till, Lane Harper as Medgar Evers.
We are asking for $6.4 trillion.
Just get everything cleaned up and get this Negro the hell out of here.
I don't see any reason why we should be given $6 trillion for something that happened 200 years ago.
First of all, it didn't happen 200 years ago. It started 200 years ago.
Unless the government agrees to be sued, it can't be. And guess what? The government does not agree. So case closed.
Streaming online July 4th at www.justiceontrialthemovie.com. Also available on Vimeo and Amazon Prime.
Yep, that's it. That's the movie that we're talking about, and that's going to be the topic of discussion tonight. We're talking about all of it. Talking about reparations. We're talking about the lives of those who've gone before us. In the movie, they used examples of Emmett Till, Harriet Tubman, Medgar Evers, and they come into the line of defense of the black population versus the Justice Department on whether or not black people deserve justice in the country. I'm gonna start with you, Norman. You're a champion for justice. You got a lot going on. Where does this kind of what is the culture? How does it fit into what you have going on as an attorney in today's culture?
Well, I will tell you that what we're experiencing now is a lot of energy that suggests that the mood of the nation is one of urgency, one that cannot be delayed. As we all know, justice delayed is just justice denied. And that's what we've seen over and over again in this country. When justice has not been served, it's justice denied. And the same offenses occur over and over again. But I'm so excited tonight that there is a wave that's sweeping the country that sends the message and sending a message very strongly that there is a sense of urgency, and we are just marching. We're not just protesting, but we have an end goal in mind. There's a saying, always begin with the end in mind. And what's going on in the country now is a start with the end in mind, and that's justice in the sense of justice and not just us. Too long in this country, for the minority community, justice has represented just us on the bad side of the state. But I'm excited tonight because I feel a change. What about you, RJ?
I mean, I definitely feel a change here in Tampa. You know, a couple of weeks ago, even last week, the tension of the city was high. I live around the Jackson Heights community, around the Belmont Heights community, and quite frankly, the helicopters were flying in circles over my neighborhood.
Wow.
And you know, it was a situation where the young people at any time would be on the corner, ready to go over and interrupt business over at the police substation. It is a time and season where the unrest and the voice of the community is crying out loud. My desire is that the tension of the protest not dissipate, that we don't have another moment where we got emotional and upset because of another hashtag, but didn't make any progress. So my endeavor is to find out what it is you all think about how we as a community can stabilize ourselves, strategize, and mobilize so that we don't have to continue going through this perpetuation of hashtags in our society. Attorney Dowdell, what do you think about what's going on?
Well, I think it's a very dangerous time, but exciting as well. We're going to have to mobilize the young people to register and vote. This is what Malcolm X said. He said, you know, the battle of the bullet. You got to be able to not just get excited, but we got to take substantial steps toward freedom. The way you get economic freedom, you can transfer from political freedom. And the way you get political freedom, you register. Now you register, then you go out and vote. And you vote for your best interest of your community as an African-American race. And that's how you get the power. We are still in economic slavery. As long as we're in slavery, slavery is slavery. Whether or not you're in physical slavery, mental slavery, spiritual slavery, or economic slavery. Let's free ourselves by getting our money. Now, Robert Johnson, the former founder of BET, he just came out with an article where he stated that we're entitled, I concur, $14 trillion for reparations. So we got to talk about real numbers. We're not talking about millions or billions. We're talking about trillions. That's going to be sufficient. That 40 acres of mills, that old land. We're beyond that. Our law firm, we'll be able to donate millions to the community. How do I come from being homeless in law school to donate millions? Because I understand the power of economic power. I can talk. Unless I'm willing to invest millions in the community, It's all for now.
So we're talking about trillions of dollars. How does this also turn into a conversation of faith? Dr. Harris, I mean, you got young people that you're inspiring as a dean and president of the Jakes Divinity School. What are you telling them about what's going on now? How are you talking about them in terms of speaking truth to power in a time like now?
First of all, RJ, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And I think that it's of tremendous importance that we have this conversation. Energy is high. The relevance of the conversation is commonplace, right? I think that part of what my message is to not allow isolated situations to control our emotions to the point where we lose the courage to continue forward once the news cycle moves on. We've been here before. We've been here many times before. Not quite like it is this time, right? We didn't have the compound effect of COVID-19 and COVID-16-19 going on at the same time. Not in the way that we've experienced it over the last few months. So I would suggest that part of it is now, with the diversity of interests in these issues, it is of paramount importance that this be a time of a great awakening. And what I mean by that is that there is a revival of information, an understanding of history that's been left out of mainstream historical books, so that we can get to the root of the matter, to understand what racism is. And it's not language that is used as an attack that has framed the moral fibers of our society. And those moral fibers have not been plucked up, even though we have changed some laws and we've got some Black people elected into office. But we still have this pervasive social pandemic that I think with the energy we have now, white, Black, brown people all paying attention to this, to the matter that Black lives really have not mattered in this country. And this is not a woe is me, come pat me on the back, watch my feet, be my friend. This is a social construct that Black America has had to live with, and it's become normalized, even to the point where even in the Black community, there is this often this disorientation to where this came from and why it's a reality. And so education is so key to unpack all of the nuances related to the issue that may or may not affect me as an individual, but it does affect Black America. And I think that this is an education that not only our students or Black students or brown students need to be aware of, but also the white community, because this is not Black history as if we have our own little history over here. Black history is white history. We're all in this together, and it's part of all of our historical reality. And I think that if we fix this problem, it advances all of society. So that's my message. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Listen, I spoke earlier with the writers and producers of the movie, and one of the individuals who was one of the consultants. His name is Dr. Robert Wright from Alabama State University. And I asked him specifically, how does today's culture and the tension of protest, the tension of racial injustice, the tension of all of this being in our faces, how does that shape the perspective of college students? I remember being in college. I remember being able to vote for my first time as a college student. I remember my voting choices being shaped by that morphing environment, the environment where I realized that everything that mom and daddy told me about everybody wasn't exactly what they told me. I had never seen open same-sex relationships before. I remember my first day at college. I drove up to my dorm for band camp, and beside me pulled up a candy apple green Chevy with hydraulics, bumping the Tupac. and bumping the "I Get Around" by Tupac, and out of it walked the white dude with his cap turned back, and everything that I had been told was like completely obliterated. It's like my whole life got shaken up like an Etch-a-Sketch. It's like you got to draw this thing all over again. In a moment like college, how do you think that the situations of today are changing? It's getting ready to be the summertime. They're going to make decisions about whether or not they're even going to go to school. They've been schooled and educated now by way of virtual classes. Attorney Harris, do you think that this turns around with an increase of interest from our young African American community to become lawyers, to become attorneys, to jump in the fight against civil justice? What do you think about that?
Well, I got to tell you, with the energy that I see across the country that seems by and large to be driven by our youth and young adults, and I give a thumbs up to Black Lives Matter. That's the movement. I mean, Black Lives Matter has reached and influenced and energized so many youth and young adults across the country. And I don't know if these young folks are thinking of it in terms of how it will shape their professional choices, but I can't help but to think that at a point like this, all is fair game. We who are a little bit older, I'm not much older, but a little bit older, I think we should be with our young people, young adults, providing guidance and helping them to understand that this is not just a moment in history that calls for emotion, but this is a moment in history that calls for intellect as well, which would be inclusive of strategy and how one can use his or her gifts and talents and skills to help continue the mission for which we are marching about, for which we are protesting about. I think it's important that we all understand and help our youth and young adults to understand that what we saw with George Floyd, what we saw in Atlanta the other week, is not just about those individuals who lost their lives, but it's much broader than that. And secondly, it's not just about law enforcement. I think it's helpful to understand law enforcement as being a face reflecting a deeply rooted issue in the broader culture or the broader society. And if we understand, it's not about just one man dying or one man dying by the hand of law enforcement, and understand it to be deeply rooted in a broader issue, it would help us to then understand the importance of how we should position ourselves mentally and academically, intellectually, to confront this and make sure we see it through. It's not something we start today and it just fades out and we just live life and another incident happens. No. This is something that we should be thinking about how we can become lawyers or bankers or teachers or healthcare providers. Because if we understand the issue broader than just the death of one person or just an injustice advanced by a law enforcement agency, then we'll know that the broader issue of racism is pervasive in all parts of society. So it doesn't matter if it's healthcare, it doesn't matter if it's housing, it doesn't matter, if it's, the list goes on. So whatever it is that we encourage these young people to focus in terms of their education or whatever it is they feel like they should pursue, I think it's helpful to understand that we don't live separate lives. We're one person, and life is a full circle. I can't put my student hat on and when I go to school and then take it off when I go to the grocery store. I can't put my religious hat, whether it's Christian or any other religion, on when I'm practicing my religion, doing a worship experience. Then I take it off, and now I'm a citizen when I go to the movie or go wherever you go. But all of this, all of life connects. And so whatever we do and whoever we are, we should bear in mind that all of who we are should be focused on achieving what we need to achieve.
Now you say that you can't put on your individual hats, but you sure got on your individual hat tonight.
But it's a style.
Dr. Harris.
I'm talking about lifestyle.
Dr. Harris, you just wrote a very provocative book. Is provocative and quite prophetic for such a time as this. Talking about is Christianity the white man's religion? Wow. I heard I was on another call last night, another live with Bishop David Bright Austin out of Raleigh, North Carolina last night, and he was talking about how there's now a division between three churches, between the black church, the white church, and the mixed church. We've seen an outcry from churches who had multicultural context and questioning evangelical leaders and wondering, are black people going to still go to those churches where their pastor doesn't share the same concern for them openly that it does for other parishioners? What are your colleagues saying about this kind of conversation? Are we going to have a racial unrest in the midst of our religious centers? Is everything, when we come back from COVID, are we really going to be at a whole new normal where black folks are going to run back to black churches and they're not going to go to white churches anymore? How do you think this is going to affect the landscape of the church as we know it?
Thank you again for the question. I hope not. I hope that we don't resort to sort of silos or our own tribes. Hopefully, given the diversity of the movement, that the movement doesn't outpace the church. I do think that the movement has been moving faster than the church, and the protest has been in the streets, and the protest should also be in the church. In fact, the church should lead the protest. You look at during the bubonic plague in the 1600s, Martin Luther wrote the 95 Theses and put them on the church's door. And it was during a time where there was a pandemic or an epidemic, and he protested the church. And it came out of that was a Protestant movement. Protestant comes from the word protest. So I hope that this is not a time that it separates sort of social transformation from the transformation we desperately need within our religious circles. I think that what I hope is that during this time, pastors are humbled and not arrogant. And that's one. And two, that we hear what the Spirit is saying. And I think the Spirit is crying from the streets. And we can't expect that spirituality is, sort of trapped in a church somewhere, disconnected from the world, but rather the Spirit is moving in the world. And there's a cry of the Spirit saying that, behold, I make all things new. And hopefully the church would understand that we're not making the church great again. We're moving forward. We're not on that, to take a line from the president. We're actually moving towards something new. And I think that same message, different method, and it must be more diverse than it has been in the past. I think the movement is pushing toward integration and fair treatment of all people and affirmation of all humanity as equally in the eyes of God. And so I think that it would be a tragedy if we all just sort of resort to our own little white, black silos. That would be very bad for the church because I think then nobody will go.
Now, you said that you think that the movement is moving towards integration. There's been a lot of conversation to say that integration was the moment where the African-American community lost hold. They're saying that integration and us being able to blur the lines was the point where we no longer could identify our communities. They're saying that integration was the last time that we really knew what we had in terms of a black community. freedom, justice, the American way. Attorney Dowdell, how do you proceed to ensure African Americans that as you fight for them in the courtroom, that you can offer them freedom, justice, and American way, when every day we turn around, we don't see images of justice for Black folks?
Right, but that's a good question. I think what we got to do while we are being diverse and we're being politically correct, and we're trying to have this commingling of the races, we must stand strong to our faith. Now, this is not what I say. This is what the Bible says about all of this. And we're willing to read Ecclesiastes 10:19. It's going to shock a lot of people. Ecclesiastes 10:19, the King James Version says this. It says, a feast is made for laughter, and wine make it merry. But, anybody want to complete that for you?
I pull my Bible out so I can get it for you.
Is the answer to all problems.
A feast is made for laughter, and wine make it merry. But money answers all things.
Yes, sir.
Ecclesiastes 10:19, King James Version.
So money is the answer to all problems.
Well, I'm just talking about the Bible. Anything is physical. We're back to reparation. We talk about diversity. We talk about law enforcement reform. We talk about equal protection under the Civil Rights 1964 bill. We can go back to the course of history. We talk about this disparity in the health system of the COVID-19. African American, we talk about unemployment rate. We can go on in the industry. It's going to come down to, if we want real freedom, we must get economic freedom. The Bible says this, and we must comply as Christians. We must stand firm and hold strong to our faith. And our faith said that we have a right not only just be a part of the table, we need to own the table. Not just get a seat at the table. We need to talk about ownership, entrepreneurship, stocks and bonds, gold bars. If you have economic power, you cannot have physical power without economic power. So while we want this diversity to be politically correct, that's good. God wants us to commingle. We don't want us to commingle that we have to give up our culture just to be blindsided or brainwashed with their cultures, because we're not economically independent.
You said that money answer all things. We talk about that. The Bible said we're talking about reparations. What does trillions of dollars repair in the African American community? Because when we get $1,200, we still don't spend it with us. We go spend it over there. Tell me how reparations is gonna fix this.
Well, this is what the Bible said. The Bible said that we should lend and not borrow. So first of all, God don't want us dependent on man, because he's our source. So what this wealth gives us, it will give us the sense of independence. We need to be homeowners. Okay, we don't need to get away from renting. It's okay to rent when you have to. We need to think about ownership. The Bible said we should lend and not borrow. That's how you get power. So we need to take this reparation and own our houses. We need to be possessed of warranty deeds, not just paying a mortgage, but we need to be debt free, says the Lord. Once we are debt free, we can control our schools, we can control our law enforcement. You can control our banks. There's no aspect of our life that we won't be in control once we get this economic power, which is ordained by God himself.
Now, I think Derrell is right. I think if I can jump in there, I think he's right about the need for economic power. When the abolition of slavery after the Civil War, during the Great Migration, and African Americans were no longer bound by legal slavery. Part of how African Americans were never able to get on their own 2 feet was this government gave a stimulus package to the former slave owners to make up for them losing their help. So there was this sense of, oh my gosh, slavery is over. I know you're going to miss the help and you're going to lose if you don't get some sort of stimulus. Well, because only white lives matter, they are the ones who got the stimulus. It was about the money. Black lives didn't matter, wasn't even really considered human. So they should just be happy they're free. But there was no stimulus package to get them going. There was no money that was given to these folks. We talk about this 40 acres and a mule stuff that never happened. But the idea is that Black people then had to turn around and work for the former slave master. And so they were never really at an economic equal playing field. And once you start that way, hundreds of years later, and we're only 100 years from it, right? We're only 100 years, well, a little over 100 years from that. Which means we're about 3-4 generations from it, maybe 4 generations from it. But the point is that it's not even within reason, to expect that African Americans will have equal footing from an economic perspective, or that their lives would matter, or that their communities would be equal to many of the other communities, or opportunities would be equal. It's not even reasonable, just in plain reason. And then you think about when African Americans by 1920 were trying to create their own economic engine, say in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This government, not the people across town, this government bombed Black Wall Street. So this government has a history of rioting the Black community. I mean, they can talk about, the people in the community on the street, and there were a few riots that happened. That's bad, but let's talk about how this government bombed Black communities. Not only Black Wall Street, let's talk about Rosewood, right? Let's talk about places where the police in this country over the last 100 years have outright rioted the Black community. I mean, we're talking about 1 or 2 people, knee on neck and things like that, which is horrible. But this country has a history of this government either outright doing it or not saying anything when groups of citizens like the KKK did it. So that's what I mean. We got to have a real honest conversation about history. This is not superstition. It's not an idea we sat around the lake and came up with this sort of fabricated this sort of conspiracy theory. This is a historical fact. Well, so when you talk about reparations, you're not talking about giving somebody something that they don't deserve. My grandfather came out of, Norman and I brothers, our grandfather came out of World War II and never got his GI Bill. And so many other Blacks who came out of World War II. He fought for this country for a flag that once he got home, they may as well put around his neck and choked him with it. For 83 years, he never got anything. So many other Black people in the Black community. So that happened in World War II. That happened in the Vietnam War. It happened in the Korean War. And it's still happening today. I was talking to a veteran the other day from the Korean War. He said that the Veterans Administration is one of the largest slavery mills in the country because it does not ensure that Black folk who serve in the government, who serve in our military services, they do not do their due diligence in ensuring that they're honored and taken care of like they should. So you said that history has a way of repeating itself, and the only way to break the perpetual cycle of history is to expose the generations to the lessons of history. Are we doing our community justice as it relates to us preparing our young people to make a change in culture so that they don't have to repeat the situations that we're going through right now?
Pastor, let me just reiterate. When I told you about the Ecclesiastes 10:19, actually that was introduced to me by Johnny Cochran. And I was saying, Mr. Cochran, I said, you always talk about monies and millions for your clients. He's a young man. He said, it's good to get legislation, good to get reform, but let's give them economic freedom. Now, the way we do this with Dr. Harris and you, sir, and Norman Harris, you guys are ministers of the gospel. See, you guys have an audience that consists of tens of thousands of people. And like what you're doing tonight, you are setting the platform to discuss these very serious issues. I would ask you guys to continue to do what you're doing. Just do it consistently. We can't talk about reparations 1 week, then next month we forget it. No, it's not something that we do occasionally. It's got to be a part of the conversation on a regular basis. If Robert Johnson, the first legitimate African-American billionaire, said that we need 14 trillion, guys, we got to discuss this seriously. Now, Johnny Cochran, one of his last complaints for damages he was involved in was for reparation. Google it. Johnny Cochran said, look, Derrell, he said, tell all your young colleagues, you can fight for civil rights. But in fighting for civil rights, you also have to fight for economic rights. It goes hand in hand. One is not separate from the other. They go together.
So if economic rights has got to be along with civil rights, how can we have civil rights if we don't have economic rights? But how can we have economic rights if there's nobody fighting for civil rights? Too often, normally we in Tampa, you got a ticket. I ain't even gonna talk about what ticket it is, but we got some specific board seats in our community where a African American should be the voice on that seat. Once one African American signs up to run for the seat, another African American signs up, and another, and you got 4 brothers and sisters fighting against each other to get the same seat, not realizing we're splitting our community's vote. What do we do to parallel our community? What do we do? You've seen what it's like to try to get pastors together to have a conversation in this city. It's just like, sprinkling water in the wind, if you understand what I'm saying. What do we do to align our community together so that we can look like a community? What do we do? Because quite frankly, as a pastor, if I'm marching and protesting down the street and my congregation ain't following behind me, I'm just taking a nice walk. What do we do to pull our community together?
Well, I always say we have to advocate, but to effectively advocate, we must educate. Educating and advocating are 2 things that go hand in hand. And I think a lot of times when we look at it one-sided, just from the perspective of advocating, we lose the importance of what it means to educate. And I think a lot of times the African American community does very poorly at disagreeing with each other, does very poorly adapting the craft, what they call the craft mentality, where if one seems like one is about to make it, then the other one pulls that one down, because we're not really educated. My brother Antipas said something important, as did Derrell as well, when they were talking about history. See, I think if we understand this, there are 4 things, and there may be more, but I know at least 4 things that the racist system, or the racist structure that has been supported by a racist system, that have been, the 4 things been used against us as Black. 1, denial of the vote. 2, the denial of a right to own land. 3, a denial of a right to learn and read. And 4, the destruction of the family unit. Those are 4 things, if you look back, all the way back, hundreds of years ago, when the international slave trade was illegal and operative, carried on over to domestic chattel slavery. The denial of the right to read, denial of the right to vote, their own land, and the destruction of the family unit. Now, specifically to the point you're making now, let's look at the last one I raised, destruction of the family unit. That thing was strategic, how they separated husband and wife, separated children from parents, separated siblings from each other. That thing runs deep, and it was strategically done to have intergenerational impact. And here we are, hundreds of years later, and we still operating under one of those 4 things. And I can talk about all 4 of them, but just talk about that destruction of the family unit. And it has bred a curse in the community to distrust each other. It has bred a curse in the community to work against each other, to compete against each other. Where what happened to it's okay to disagree as long as you disagree without being disagreeable. Wise men and women disagree, but fools fall out. That seems to escape many parts of our community, and we're so fragmented and work against each other. But if we were to educate ourselves and understand the strategy of the enemy, the wiles of the devil, and understand that a strategy of the enemy was to create within the community a spirit of self-divisiveness. And if we understand it and chop it at the root and curse the curse, then we can move forward with a more progressive agenda in terms of working together as a community and coming together as a united front. Even, I'll say this and I'll be quiet, as a preacher in me is just about to wake up. We talk about the story of the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus in the Christian community. But one of the things that I very seldom hear highlighted during the Passover Easter season is there were two opposing forces came together to achieve one goal, and that's the crucifixion of Jesus. The Jews and the Romans put aside their differences, came together and worked in concert for the great production of the crucifixion. Now, we don't supposed to be opposing enemies. We just have some disagreements and some differences, and we allow this agreement and differences to obstruct our vision and effort to achieve a common goal. We need to educate ourselves and make education a part of the advocating process.
Dr. Harris, Norman just alluded to there being two opposing forces, good and evil. Two opposing forces. In church, often there are two opposing forces. Folks who do and folks who don't. How can we as a church actively pursue justice? Not just talking about Micah 6, not just talking about the book of Esther. How do we make justice a reality for today? How do we make justice something that our children can afford, even though we've never seen justice in our society before? How do we get there? How do we show them how to do something that we've never been able to do?
Well, thanks for the question. I think it's really important to, one, we throw a word around a lot that I'm not sure if there's a common understanding of what it means, the word justice. Justice for George, justice for, what does that even mean? I think when we talk about we want to achieve something that is not clear what it is, it becomes difficult to achieve it. I think it means different things in different places and different, so I think we have to be able to define what we're talking about. I think, and I even say I think because I don't know, when we say, I want justice for George Floyd, what does that mean? Does it mean we want vindication on his killers, his murderers? Because there is really no true justice in the sense of equal treatment when it comes to a person whose life was taken, right? You can argue, one may argue, well, kill their life, but that's not really justice, is it? That's more, not even true vindication. It's just due to them what they did to somebody else. And then there's the justice that we talk about in terms of all of us who are alive. We want justice for humanity. What do we mean by that? That as we live in the world, we want to all matter. Therefore, Black lives must finally matter so that our lives and livelihood will equally matter as any other person under the eyes of God. And so to achieve that kind of justice, it's more not equality, but equity.
That's right.
Equity says you have to work harder to get somebody pulled up to an equal the playing field. Because if you give a person that is 600 pounds a bag of potato chips, and you give someone who is 40 pounds a bag of potato chips, the effect is different. It's equal, but it doesn't get them. It's not fair because it is disproportionate to where the person is. So the analogy quickly breaks down, I know, but I think you get the picture. That the same thing applies, that and this is the argument about reparations, is that you cannot get somebody up to the same equal playing field by now all of a sudden saying, we're just going to be equal. That's not fair, is it? Because equity says you may have to give more here to get them up to be equal with what's there. That could be opportunity, it can be money, it can be, it's a ton of things. You talked about, how do reparations supposed to repair? Well, it's not going to repair if we don't even have the same understanding of finances or value systems, right? Or understand investments, so you can't just give money in a dark hole with no understanding and education of what to do with it, right? So it's more to reparations than mere dollars, because money can't fix this problem alone. It's only part of the picture. And it does answer problems, but it only answers problems when we know how to apply it to the problem. But if I don't apply it to the problem, then it didn't fix the problem.
All right, Attorney Dowdell.
Dr. Harris, young guys, since I'm with biblical scholars, I would be remiss if I didn't quote one of you guys' colleague, Dr. King. And this is what he said, guys. He said, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. How we demand this, we must be solidified. You're talking about 4 African-American running for 1 seat. You dilute the vote, and a Caucasian or someone else get the seat, because we didn't come together and be united. The Bible also said a house divided against itself cannot stand. So we must come on common ground and seek out how we unify our causes together. Be that an African-American on the south side of town with a associate degree, or an African-American on the north side of town with a doctoral degree. We must come together as a African-American race and be able to somehow settle our differences and decide who should run for what seat, when, where, and how. Because being divided is not going to help us, guys. I don't care if you're African-American with $1 million in the bank or African-American with $10,000 salary. We must come together for the common good of the community. If we're going to come together, we must be united. A house divided against itself physically can never stand. So what you're doing is great tonight, because you're having a dialogue with young men. Like I said, I'm 55 years old. I'm talking to you young leaders. So I'm not saying I know everything. I'm learning it tonight. So what we have to do, we have to get those who were born in the 60s, the 30s, the 40s to talk with the millennials, so we can see what we have in common to go and settle and handle it and settle the problem. We can't do it if I think I got all the education, I got all the degrees, and I have all the money. We must commingle our minds, our resources, our experiences, and our wisdom together. So you will not have 4 African-American running for 1 seat. You guys be able to educate each other and see which one give us the greatest opportunity to win that seat. That comes from being educated and comes from being together. One mind. Can't have different minds. We can have different opinions, but at the end of the day, we must reconcile our internal differences to come together for the common good of the community. That's the way you do.
I want to throw some gas on the fire. You talking about us coming together as a community, and we don't even want to live in the Black community no more. We want to live out there behind the gate. We want to work at their jobs. We want to go to their schools. We want to go to places where they allow us to be. But when it comes to us protesting, they'll allow us to walk around on the inside of our Black community. They'll allow us to be inside our streets. But they don't want us to go out. Ain't nobody protesting out there in the subdivision. Ain't nobody protesting in rural America. We're still there. Every now and then you find out that a Black person becomes the president of the homeowners association. And that Black person begins to disallow other Black folks from moving out there because we don't want them to drive down our property value. How in the world do we have a community conversation when the community is cut up by roads and highways? How do we have a community conversation when Lil Suge don't want Big Mama's house no more, so they done moved out and the white folks done come and bought the land? How do we do this in the middle of not knowing what the planning commission is going to do with gentrification? How do we have a community conversation when we can't even identify where the community is?
Let's start with dialogue. It's what you're doing tonight. It don't have to be a major audience. It starts with what you're doing tonight. If you're willing to continue to do this, we got Dr. Harris. You know, he had this forum. We got the young attorney Esquire down there in Tampa, Norman Harris. If we continue to do this, the Bible said death and life is in the power of the tongue. So we got to have an open and honest and sometimes painful dialogue, even within our own race. There's got to be an open and honest, sometimes painful dialogue, just what you're stating. We got to get past these differences. And when you get past, you got to have a dialogue.
I think that what you're getting at there is the reason why we need to have a new type of conversation about race. Because and we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? We can talk about strengthening the Black community and becoming one, as Attorney Dowdell was saying, and, coalescing together and deciding who's going to run for office, get behind that person. We could do that, and we do need to do that. At the same time, I think that because we're not drinking out of the Black water fountains anymore, and we do have degrees and we have intellect, we have to also not just vote, but be a part of shaping the agenda, right? We want people now to go vote, but we're voting for people who've already been determined to be the few candidates. What is the agenda? Who shaped the agenda? Who decided the city planning, right? To me, that's where the protest needs to be. It needs to be not standing on the street saying, you guys change something for us, but like my younger brother said, it's not a matter of we shall overcome, you shall be overrun. So his point is that, this is our city too. So who are these people in the dark room somewhere making these decisions? That's what we should raise hell about. Because the thing is, whoever's doing that we talking about, they doing this, who are the they? And why do they get to do something that we're not part of that decision? That's what we get to systemic and structural prophetic agency. We raise hell downtown before it gets to the agenda of who's going to be running, and who decided how the city going to be divided up. We have enough education in our community to understand how redlining happened and how it became illegal, but kind of still legal at the same time. We know how to talk about that. We know how to talk about why is it Black people over in this ghettoized community, right? We know why that's the case. So I don't want to be standing on the outside saying y'all need to do something for us. I'm saying, no, this is our country too. And look at how our president talks. We got a chief thug in office. Well, he just says what the hell he wants to say. And we're just supposed to, say, oh, look what he's doing. But what it occurred to me is we have censored what we want to say because we've had ideological colonization, right? And that's something that we have to protest. It's ideological colonization, where we just do this yes'm thing in a sophisticated way. We have got to get to the point where we say, no, that won't happen. But that can't happen in our city. And we have just as much right to address this as anybody else and raise a lot of cane about it. But if
I say no, when they give out the general improvement grants, I might not get selected. If I say no, when they choose who's going to be the new mayor's appointee in the office, my name might not come up. If I say no, the appointments from the senator and the governor doesn't really fall in my direction. So there's a lot of us who have inherent abilities to understand. There's a lot of us who are educated. There's a lot of us who are in great positions. But somehow it is that when we get in those positions, we never represent the us that we used to be a part of. And so my question is, when we pull together those who are educated, are they even willing to serve on the commission? Are they willing to leave their house and go represent the side of town that doesn't have anybody that can really talk the language? Are they willing to share their story with the younger generation? Because what I'm finding out, that there's a whole lot of old folks, but they ain't really many city fathers anymore. They don't make gatekeepers like they used to make gatekeepers anymore. There's not a lot of the barbershop conversation that used to happen. We don't do barbershop conversations no more. We show up when it's time for us to get our hair cut and we deuces. So how is this supposed to happen?
overcome ideological colonization. We need to be abolitionists. You just described what I was talking about. How we get in these positions and suddenly, because I want my name on the ticket, so I'm gonna play the card this way. So I'm gonna, then you're allowing people. We gotta address it from a standpoint of not just saying Black Lives Matter to a system that has said that it doesn't, but we gotta believe Black Lives Matter. In other words, do we really believe that? Sometimes you can get so beat down psychologically that you can say that, but when you really believe that, then you stand up and you start to, as a community, and that's what Attorney Dowdell was saying, while we need to be one mind, then you start moving toward that. That's the protest right there. That's the protest. Because you can march downtown all day long, and you can burn it up or whatever you're going to do. Once all that settled out, we still got them same people in those boardrooms. We get those same people deciding where the grants go, and we're just trying to play the game so we can get out. We got to change the game. And to me, this is the time to start saying this stuff, because we don't need anybody to wash our feet and be our friend and, you know, shine my shoes and smile at me when I'm walking down the street. Yeah, I want you to do that as opposed to shooting me. But that's not going to change the system. That's what we got to call out, what you just called out. And that is people in the back room determining how many Black people's minds they can control so that they can have a Black person who they give the money to who it never changes the community. And then we get up in there and get this yes-a mentality where we just so happy to be in the room that we really sacrifice our own community for our own personal gain. Oh, somebody say hallelujah on this evening.
I need an organ. Can I get it? Anybody got an organ?
So then we embody the same that created slavery, the same greed that created Jim Crow, the same greed that's pervasive in our community today. Because at the end of the day, racism, the bottom line is greed. We didn't have a brown problem and a white problem as much as we had a gold problem. That's why we ended up here as the machine to build this country. And I say gold as opposed to green because they didn't have green money. They had gold underground in Africa. Africa was more wealthy underground than it was above ground. So if they come in and get all what's up under the ground and they can build this new world with the resources that are above the ground and the resources bottom of the ground, Portugal thought it was going to be the next superpower after Rome fell. So that's why they went to Angola and they raped the ground up under the ground and took the Black people and brought them to Brazil and to the New World, namely to Virginia and to New York, because they wanted to be superpower. This is about power and greed. And that's what set this whole thing in motion.
Amen.
Norman Harris.
Amen, Dr. Harris.
What we're going to do, Norman, Attorney Norman, how we going to fix this? We just sat outside with some elders in our city, and they pretty much watched us street something that we wanted to do. And it meant a lot to me that they showed up to support us. How do we move forward? You the young civil rights attorney in town. I'm just a humble servant over here at the Miracle on 42nd Street. How do we put this together so we can make a life-changing impact in our community?
Okay, one of the things I think that is an imperative is, and it goes back to something I said earlier, we must educate ourselves. And in context, let me say, we must understand each operating agency in our local, state, and federal government. And that's where, that's a start, understanding it. And then when you understand it, you understand the operations of it, because once we start making demand, it serves no purpose if we don't make informed demands. Before you fight, you got to understand the battle. It's too often we ready to fight when we don't understand the battle. Let me break it down and make more sense. For an example, right here in Tampa, we have two law enforcement agencies, Tampa Police Department and Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Well, if we want to demand changes systemic change that support structures of injustice. Just not picking on the law enforcement, but using that as an example. We got to understand how they operate. We got to understand what's that system of corporal and major and captain and lieutenant, and the number of officers that serve under them and how they are assigned to particular parts of the community. Because if we want to make an advance, for an example, one thing that will help resolve the issue with implicit bias, which is systematic, however you want to pronounce it, one other way to address that is to demand community policing. Well, one of the leaders of the agencies may say, well, we do community policing. But if we don't understand the specifics of how policing is divided and broken down for community, and then demand the demographic breakdown of, if it's in, for an example, Progress Village, which is a community in Hillsborough County. If it's Progress Village, we know Progress Village is predominantly Black. And if the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office has officers patrolling Progress Village, what is the race demographic that's controlling Progress Village, which is predominantly Black? Well, just say it may be 67 or 80% white. All right, and then you have other communities like we got South Tampa and we got East Tampa, or Brandon, which is Hillsborough County, to keep it more level since we're talking to Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. There may be Black community in Brandon area, and predominantly Black officers patrolling that Black community, and that's where community policing is taking place. But it's really not taking place where the predominantly white officers are patrolling a predominantly Black area like Progress Village. But when you have discussion, we do community policing. Well, we got to drill down, is the point I'm making. And again, I'm not picking on Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I actually admire Sheriff Chad Cronister. I think he's doing great things. But that's just an easy example to show how we must educate ourselves with agencies and drill down on what may be happening and what might not be happening, to know how to make informed demands that will push an agenda that transforms culture. And that's the same thing with health. That's the same with healthcare industry. That's the same thing with the courts, with the state attorney's office. We got to learn those agencies and know how they operate, and don't let them get by with saying generalized statements when we don't really understand what that means, and if what they're saying really addresses the issue that will push transformation. I'm sick of progress that's buried in old systems that does nothing but defeat the purpose of the alleged progress. We need a transformed culture. We need to destroy old systems and put in new systems so that the progress that we like to make a big deal about we having will be meaningful.
As we get ready to wrap it up for the night, everybody take a round about it. Let's make some summarizing statements. Sell your books. Talk about what it is you're doing next. Sell your tickets to your next concert. Do whatever you got to do. This is your elevator speech. Go right ahead. Who wants to go first?
Well, look, I just say this. Thanks, guys, for having me, Pastor Stevenson. What you're doing with this dialogue, combating systemic racism, law enforcement reform, all that is important, but it starts with a dialogue. We know God created the world with a word. We must have open and painful and honest dialogue. The good news on reparation, we have a young lady from the state of Texas down there with Dr. Harris. Her name is Sheila Jackson. She introduced a bill, HR 40, and it says here, the Commission to Study and Development Reparation Proposal for the African American under the African American Act. So legislatively, this is moving forward, guys. So if the ministers with this huge congregation, you got to just continue to talk about economic wealth. We know we need spiritual wealth, physical wealth, stay in good health, but we also got to take this reparation seriously because it's moving. We want to get on and be on the right side of history with this reparation. So contact your local, state, and federal legislators and ask them what their position on what they're doing to advance reparation for the African American race. Thank you.
Come on, Dr. Harris, sell that book.
Well, I got Christianity, White Man's Religion. Go to Amazon.com. You can order it now. And the book it's a bestseller, #1 in this category on Amazon. I'm really excited about it. People are reading it. I got an email from a university today that a president is buying a copy of the book for all employees of the university. He read it, he loves it, and he wants everybody in the university to read the book. So you need to read it as well. It comes out officially June 23rd. That's this Tuesday. It'll be in stores everywhere, but you can order it right now on Amazon and be one of the first to read it. I only ask that you will put a review of the book on Amazon. Please.
What's the name again?
Is Christianity the white man's religion? Is Christianity the white man's religion? The content of the book speaks a lot to what we're going through right now. That white, brown, black, calling from everywhere. I spoke to a white pastor today in Minnesota who said he loves the book, asked me to come speak to his church. The book is easy reading, but it is full of rich resources and academic support for what the points of the book. So please get it, and I hope that it's a blessing to all of you.
Man, you sold that book so well, Attorney Dowdell jumped right off and went and got it.
There you go.
Norman, what you got going on, man?
Well, I'll tell you, I haven't written a book yet, but I got a feeling that I might be writing one really soon. But I do have a practice, Champions for Justice. We do criminal defense work, personal injury. As a matter of fact, Attorney Derrell Dowdell has been a mentor to me since I was in law school. He gave me my first internship experience in personal injury practice, and he ended up hiring part-time. And since I became a lawyer, we've handled some good cases together, some wrongful death cases, and some other things. And he has been one of those more seasoned African-American brothers that have certainly shown what it means to be a community father and mentor. But I also do, I'm starting to do civil rights law, and that's pretty much because of the demand, and I want to be a community servant in whatever way that I can. So let me say this. We hear a lot of talk about progress. We've heard a lot of talk about rights. We hear a lot of talk about integration, which means present. But there is a difference between progress and cultural transformation. There's a difference between right and power. There's a difference between presence and participation. And until progress becomes transformation, until rights become power, until presence becomes voice and participation, we ain't got there yet. And we'll keep fighting, because I believe in the America which we call the beautiful.
All right. So I am endeavoring into a lot of community responsibility. What you see behind me are hydroponic tower gardens, and on Sunday we'll be cutting a ribbon on the 42nd Street Garden of Miracles. We've found a way to make sustainable sources of nutrition here in the Tampa Bay community. I'm hoping it's something that we can use as a model to do the same thing in our communities. I'm also been invited to speak on the Rethinking Church Virtual Summit on July the 25th. I'm excited about that. And I'm over here in my corner at 42nd Street, finding the miracles, being accountable and responsible for these miracles over here. And me and Attorney Norman, we've made this series of community handshakes where we're going around to the different communities in Tampa, pulling the kids out, talking to them about how they're feeling, letting them get some of their trauma out, but not leaving them traumatized, letting them know that some of us young adult faces. I'm gonna be a young adult as long as I possibly can. Some of us young adult faces are doing what we can to speak up for them and to provide a platform for them to be heard. Thank you all so much for your insight on the night. I'm thankful that you made time for us for the conversation, and I look forward to doing something like this again soon. Please support the movie Justice on Trial. It comes out again on July the 4th. If you're interested in how to get your hands on this movie, you can go to newsaintpaul.org, NEWSAINT Paul.org, and you can get access to this movie. If you are a faith leader, if you have a church, or if your pastor is interested in using this movie as a fundraiser, the producers of this movie are trying to get the African-American churches to, churches anywhere actually, to lock arms with him, to partner with pushing this movie. If you're interested in that, hit me in my inbox, send me an email, get more information on the website, newsaintpaul.org. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope that it's been well spent, and we'll see you all next time. God bless.
God bless.
Bless.